For several decades, scientists and astronomers have predicted that a doomsday asteroid will plot a course for Earth. Knowing that geological records boast about 200 globally distributed impact craters, astronomers warn that it is just a matter of time before ground zero arrives again. Since their discovery, we have had close calls or near misses, some of which were mistakenly observed after passing. NASA classifies these planet smashers as Earth-crossing or near-Earth objects. The following is a controversial narrative that addresses some of the end-time predictions given as Trumpets 1 through 4, Revelation 8, 7 through 12, and the possible idea that they mark the beginning of the Great Tribulation. Could these 4 trumpet calamities be the dreaded asteroid impact that scientists have been predicting? Unlike anything you have ever read, this thought-provoking analysis provides readers with new perspectives and a contemporary understanding of the prophetic visions surrounding these 4 trumpets and their potential implications for an apocalyptic future. Whether you are a religious scholar or simply curious about what lies ahead for humanity, you may find this proposal enlightening as well as empowering. The Holocaust or Great Tribulation unleashes a global disaster that heralds its destructive forces on the land, sea and trees as outlined below. Trumpet 1, Revelation 8, 7. The first angel sounded his trumpet, and there came hail and fire mixed with blood, and it was hurled down upon the earth. 1/3 of the earth was burned up, 1/3 of the trees were burned up, and all the green grass was burned up. Trumpet 2. Revelation 8, 8 and 9. The second angel sounded his trumpet, and something like a huge mountain, all ablaze, was thrown into the sea. 1/3 of the sea turned into blood, 1/3 of the living creatures in the sea died, and 1/3 of the ships were destroyed. Trumpet 3. Revelation 8, 10 and 11. The third angel sounded his trumpet, and a great star, blazing like a torch, fell from the sky on 1/3 of the rivers and on the springs of water. The name of the star is Wormwood. 1/3 of the waters turned bitter, and many people died from the waters that had become bitter. Trumpet 4. Revelation 8:12. The fourth angel sounded his trumpet, and 1/3 of the sun was struck, 1/3 of the moon, and 1/3 of the stars, so that 1/3 of them turned dark. 1/3 of the day was without light, and also 1/3 of the night. Even though the first 4 trumpets are presented as separate sequential calamities, the overlapping and continuing aftermath should not be ignored. One important point to note is that their prophetic succession is different from Trumpets 5, 6 and 7, which have a double designation classifying them as the 3 woes. This implies they are significantly worse and independent events in which each one finishes before the next begins. Since the first 4 trumpets do not have this requirement, it seems acceptable and probable that they overlap and integrate as long as their back-to-back sequential order remains unchanged. For example, the first trumpet describes fiery hail that burns up 1/3 of the trees and all of the green grass. The second trumpet is something like a blazing mountain thrown into the sea. Some assume that the fiery hail is caused by a meteoric shower and that the mountain is an asteroid impact, which occurs later. If this is true, then how do you account for the fiery hail that is unleashed when an asteroid clashes with the atmosphere? This means we have another round of burning hail causing fires which burn up additional trees. Plus, when we combine the incinerating impact blast with the tsunamis that rush inland, vegetation is further devastated. Not to be critical, this interpretation appears to deliver a problematic fulfillment, since the second trumpet destroys more trees. By sequentially commingling, there is substantial evidence to validate that these 4 terrors are the offspring of a single asteroid. The subsequent synopsis identifies the cataclysmic tragedies that transpire moments before, during and after a mountain-size asteroid collides with one of Earth's oceans. This being said, the reader can easily compare and determine whether a single meteoric event provides the criteria needed to accurately fulfill the first 4 trumpets. Even though astronomers are continually finding new close-approaching asteroids, on April 13, 2029, the doomsday asteroid named Apophis flies dangerously close at a frightening distance of 19,000 miles. This eyebrow-raising planet smasher, measuring about 1,200 feet across, provides a realistic example of the mountain-size warhead predicted in Revelation 8. By the way, if a significantly larger asteroid were to collide, our planet would experience an extinction-level event rather than having 1/3 destroyed. So what if, while on its 8-year orbital journey, Apophis has a trajectory-diverging encounter and decides to zero in on Earth, or there is another undiscovered impactor secretly headed this way? Sadly, such a historical epic is predicted to repeat and prophetically inevitable. Thus, this chronicle begins when a deadly weapon like Apophis uncloaks and collides with Earth's vulnerable atmosphere. While hyper-jumping to ground zero, billions of pea-sized molten shards or blood-red flaming hail are like ballistic projectiles ambushing and bombarding a defenseless world. Once the target is confirmed, this unstoppable strike force ignites unrelenting, tree-carbonizing megafires. At ground zero and during detonation, superheated blast waves incinerate and bulldoze all coastal shores within the impact zone. Flaming ejecta mixed with steaming ocean water catapult miles into the sky. The subsequent stratospheric firestorm becomes a blinding inferno resembling a star blazing like a torch, or like having another sunrise. As the Earth rotates, daytime appears to have two suns while nighttime is replaced by mushrooming ejecta that is glowing brighter than the sun. Some believe the Wormwood Star is another asteroid or a comet. If this is true, then another blast of burning hail, forest fires, earthquakes, volcanoes, tidal waves, and acid rain would surpass the 1/3 specification. And if it were a star like our Sun, then total planet annihilation would unquestionably be the outcome. Since it only attacks rivers and underground springs, these options don't seem likely. So what star-like weapon performs airstrikes targeting only rivers and springs and then transforms them into pandemic killers? Could this mysterious Wormwood Star be the blazing atmospheric pyroclastic ejecta that is shining brighter than the sun? This alternative idea becomes acceptable when we realize that this molten corona condenses into a flesh-blistering downpour of acid rain. Like a giant mining operation that uses acid to separate metals, this reactive rogue pursues harmless, inert minerals in the soil. Once segregated, toxic elements like arsenic, copper, lead, mercury and the like are now deadly when intermingled with drinking water taken from rivers, lakes and underground springs. For those who may not know, water with high concentrations of isolated minerals may not always look or taste polluted. Because of this, many people can die from drinking the Wormwood Star's mouth-watering cocktail. In addition, mega tsunamis hammer coastlines, wrecking thousands of cargo, military, and other sea vessels. This marching band of destructive monster waves trumpet miles inland. As they play their songs of victory, towering walls of seawater squeeze hands with the Wormwood Star's horrific carnage. Allegedly, salt and acid rain are famous for toxifying water and killing plant life. So how does 1/3 of the sea metamorph into an ocean of blood, and does the Queen of Atlantis become a victim? Unfortunately, her attempts to dissuade Ground Zero from kicking the sleeping red dragon that snuggles restfully at her feet fail. Once awakened or activated by the escalating water temperature, this flesh-eating slayer quickly blooms into a bloody war against innocent sea life. While fed by an almost endless supply of meteoric iron, this red tide dragon steals life-giving oxygen from the seawater. Sadly and hauntingly, the Queen's ocean floor becomes a graveyard for its suffocating residents. Then, instead of wizardry fire, this blood-red dragon snorts its toxic breath onto grieving coastal cities. Unprepared for chemical warfare, survivors gasp for air. Note, without a microscope, red tide looks and coagulates like blood. So, why have a symbolic interpretation or use human blood when a perfect substitute is already present and waiting to serve? While the aftermath violently advances, the torrid fallout coalesces into sun-blocking plumes of billowing smoke. This dark night's shield soon gravitates toward and around the equator, eclipsing 1/3 of the sun, moon, and stars. Soon after, this earth-darkening reaper swings a freezing blow to the struggling vegetation. As this cosmic crisis continues, Ground Zero's weaponized tectonic shockwaves deploy an alpha strike on the volcanic ring of fire. After being rudely awakened, these smoking guns retaliate, shooting additional deadly rounds of burning hail, acid rain, and smouldering clouds of ash. While the Ring of Fire accompanies Ground Zero's genocide, mantle-cutting subductions assault unarmed gas lines. Like flame-throwing dragons, these injured, fire-intensifying transporters fight back and sacrifice their explosive fuel. Progressively searching for new targets for another predatory assault, these fire-breathers continue their conquest and liberate the remaining orbiting tachyonic grenades. On a global scale, burning hail, fires, acid rain, ocean salt water, blocking sunlight and freezing temperatures unite in a savage attempt to extinguish epic proportions of human and plant habitation. So, let us identify some problematic doomsday probabilities to help illustrate the severity. The consequential aftereffects and ground-displacing aftershocks continue demolishing cities and infrastructures such as food suppliers, public transportation, freeways, railways, and power plants. The EMP interrupts and paralyzes unprotected electronic equipment, power grids, cell towers, the internet, automobiles, etc. Therefore, acquiring food and water is logistically prohibitive and an almost unobtainable luxury. Concurrently, the shearing of municipal water and septic systems befriends the augmenting wormwood concoction. We should also note that integrated within this apocalypse, the disrupted environment has affected animal life, and many become our deadliest enemy. Have you ever wondered whether presidents would publicly announce that an unstoppable space weapon is targeting our planet? Such a disclosure becomes problematic and a political dilemma. So, if you were president, what would you do? Tell the truth and evacuate coastal cities within the impact zone, or continue the cover-up to prevent the world from exploding into mass hysteria and chaos. However, authorities may announce Ground Zero a month or two in advance to help maintain control. Thus, FEMA replaces political decisions with martial law. To reduce riots, killing and looting, FEMA magistrates will most likely mandate curfews and lockdowns followed by house-to-house searches. Once militaries confiscate food stockpiles and seize weapons and ammo, they can control buying and selling. By enforcing a Mark of the Beast system, non-compliers can be arrested and sent to prison, or held hostage in detention camps. If not already restricted, stock markets crash and many businesses close. Nonetheless, once an approaching asteroid like Apophis is visible to the naked eye, global panic supersedes any attempts to maintain stability. Knowing that the elitists, wealthy and government officials have access to underground facilities, how will the terrified population react when they are not allowed to enter? Without weapons, people are now vulnerable to attacks from hungry or injured animals, and defending against a Mad Max scenario, where every man is for himself. Food and water are cherished more than gold. In many places, currencies and credit are worthless. For the injured, receiving medical assistance from overcrowded hospitals becomes an endless nightmare. How will the feverish, virally and nefariously infected survive without their medications? Now that the Wormwood thirst quencher is traversing the roadmap of underground rivers and springs, those who ignore prophetic warnings risk their lives every time they drink a seemingly harmless glass of water. Tragically, not all water filtration systems remove deadly minerals or radioactive contaminants. Thus, having the appropriate water purification device may determine whether you live or die. Since Ground Zero disrupted weather patterns, the haunting memory of life-giving rain has developed into a hopeless possibility. Eventually, depleted water storages compel many to vacate shelters in search of uncontaminated sources. As despairing as this seemingly fictitious storyline appears, there will be loving and caring people providing relief. Mark 16:17 through 18. And these signs will accompany those who believe. In my name they will drive out demons. They will speak in new tongues. They will pick up snakes with their hands. And when they drink deadly poison, it will not hurt them at all. They will place their hands on sick people, and they will get well. So, will you become a Mad Max road warrior, or join the believers who can drink wormwood water without dying and have the power to heal the sick? End-time vignettes usually reveal our true nature, good or bad. Since the Wormwood prophecy predicts that many will die from drinking the poisoned water, we must assume that most of the population will either ignore this oracle, do not believe it because of conflicting doctrinal teachings, or have never heard it. Have you ever wondered why God sends these destructive trumpet-blowing plagues? Sadly, many people are not interested in God unless they are dying or in severe pain. Is it possible that these warnings indicate that the end is near, and that this heart-stirring narrative is a plan to save billions? Revelation 7, 9, 14, and 16. After this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and before the Lamb. These are they who have come out of the Great Tribulation. Never again will they hunger, never again will they thirst. The sun will not beat down on them, nor any scorching heat. After enduring the Great Tribulation, an uncountable number is miraculously granted passage through heaven's gates. So, what number is too large to quantify in one lifetime? To provide perspective, make one count per second for about 95 years, and your approximate total will exceed a mind-boggling 3 billion people. Perhaps this victorious triumph will change how people perceive God, and his last resort to save a deceived population. So, what disastrous bell ringer will announce the beginning of the Great Tribulation? If not an asteroid impact, then what? Or do we wake up someday and amazingly all agree that the end is here? Regardless, it seems more than a coincidence that a single asteroid and its aftermath would satisfy the prophetic criteria for interpreting the first 4 trumpets. Nonetheless, whether or not you agree with this presentation, the fact remains that eventually, Ground Zero, followed by its water-poisoning sidekick, will find its way to Earth. At some point, shouldn't a benevolent creator deliver a prophetic notification before shooting an apocalyptic space torpedo at us? Ironically, instead of religious leaders, scientists and astronomers are already playing the trumpets of revelry and initiating the undesirable wake-up call. What value do Bible prophecies have if we can't correctly decipher them? To solve this conundrum, God has graciously endowed us with common sense and thinking abilities that exceed the biased explanations sold by mainstream religions. After all, what kind of God would encrypt a prophetic message and only permit those with theological credentials to decode it? Their insights might be valuable, but it seems like a guessing game when determining who is right. They quote Revelation, but have conflicting opinions, and then speak as though they are teaching the truth. In addition, puzzled biblical teachers navigate this maze by continually changing their prophetic views to align with current events. To top it off, they also insist that the 4 trumpet harbingers transpired many years ago. Before accepting this traditional translation, some pertinent questions need answering. For example, when in the last 2,000 years has 1/3 of the trees been incinerated, 1/3 of the ocean turned red, 1/3 of the ships wrecked, or 1/3 of the sea life died? Please note that numbers may have a symbolic meaning, but not of a different number. In other words, 1/3 of the Earth refers to 1/3 of the entire planet. Some believe end-time prophecies can have more than one fulfillment. If this were true, the 7 last plagues, the 7 seals, and the second coming could happen more than once. Incidentally, there is an explanation for this prophetic confusion and why we have these misinterpretations. In Daniel 12:4, Daniel has instructions to suppress the end-time prophecies until the time of the end. More specifically, in Revelation 10:4, the 7 thunders or trumpets were concealed. For centuries, fear-inciting sermons have erroneously declared that we are in the end times. And what better way to seal up or subvert the 7 trumpets than to declare them completed years before their time? When we factor in the widely accepted pre-tribulation rapture, the 7 trumpets or an asteroid impact is of no concern. Perhaps this is why many churchgoers are unfamiliar with or have never heard of them. Consequently, this unintentional groundbreaking mistake excavates into other prophetic messages and throws dirt on how the end time will begin. Whether knowingly or not, preachers and clergy have been assisting Daniel with circumventing the intended meanings of end-time prophecies. So, is the pre-tribulation rapture just another dichotomy that is included in Daniel's cover-up plan? Now that we are getting closer to the time of unsealing, will religious leaders have the courage to undo and correct the inaccurate interpretations of the past? Or, for fear of losing congregations, will they prefer to defend erroneous conjectures? On the other hand, what will preachers do when churchgoers begin to study and question nonsensical or non-biblical prophetic doctrines? Once an asteroid like Apophis releases its heart-weakening trumpet blast, it will be too late to correct misinterpretations and help congregations prepare. According to Daniel, the closer we are to the end, the less confusing symbolic language will be. And when we include the misconstrued trumpets, the end-time story is given a facelift and can be successfully explained.
During the writing of Daniel and Revelation, the technology for explaining asteroid impacts and the aftermath did not exist. Without guidelines or rules for unpacking apocalyptic visions, theologians interpreted them at will or how they seemingly aligned with their orthodox precepts. This is especially evident since many preachers and clergy are famous for preaching that the end is near and condemning sinners to an eternal hell. Not knowing it would be hundreds of years till the end time would begin, erroneous sermons kept fear-struck congregations in a false reality and under church control. Eventually, theological wars divided religious communities and left a legacy of contradictory beliefs. Today, their wolf cry is consequently met with apathy and disgust. We may not wish to admit it, but religious systems and their preachers are guilty of misinterpreting the end-time visions of Daniel and Revelation. Please be aware that we are responsible for our choices, and their mistakes can become ours. Now that we have a better understanding of cosmic threats and are approaching the end described in the book of Daniel, we can apply the neglected use of rules or guidelines needed for accurately interpreting apocalyptic prophecies. For those interested, they are included at the end of this narrative. Thus, unsealing or obtaining legitimate interpretations is a way to unplug from the misleading arguments manifesting within the religious matrix. By this, we gain the knowledge to survive this predestined crisis. After all, those living during the Great Tribulation are the only ones who need verifiable decryptions. Nonetheless, these doctrinal discrepancies tend to segregate people into two groups. Daniel 12:10. Many will be purified, made spotless and refined, but the wicked will continue to be wicked. None of the wicked will understand, but those who are wise will understand. Rather than following church leaders, we can now push aside the dirt and dig into or unseal the symbology that has buried God's end-time gift to humanity. At some point, we all wish we could time travel into the future. Whether you know it or not, we are all given a once-in-a-galactic lifetime boarding pass that freely allows us to climb aboard God's biblical time machine. So why is it necessary to link these first four trumpets with a meteoric collision? Since astronomers contend it's only a matter of time before ground zero, synchronism helps to validate this vague prediction and renders additional insights. By peering through this predictive-looking glass, we can visit an impending future where an unexpected oceanic explosion adversely affects 1/3 of the Earth. Based on this, even though the specific sea is unidentified, we can assume that the Atlantic will most likely take the bullet. Since time travelling by way of God's looking glass does not show a specific collision date or an exact location, we must rely on astronomers and their computer programs for performing this task. Interestingly, should Apophis change to a direct hit, orbital computations point to the Atlantic as the bullseye. Please note that the asteroidal bombshell described in this narrative is not based on speculation or theory, but on historical, scientific, archaeological, and astronomical facts. Interpretations like this no longer require theologians or blind faith. Another important aspect of having this insight is that it will help reduce panic and enable those living near coastal areas to make an early pre-impact evacuation. It also allows us time to prepare for the aftermath. For example, if you live near an ocean, what is your plan for escaping tsunamis and where will you go? How close do you live to volcanoes or dangerous tectonic fault lines? And what is your plan for subverting Wormwood's deadly water? Imagine how many could survive if they had a protected source. On the other hand, how will churchgoers feel knowing that people died because they disregarded and failed to relay this information? Subsequently, should church leaders decide to encourage their congregations to prepare, they could save countless lives and demonstrate caregiving love. Another reason is that when these prophetic events occur, providing we have valid interpretations, our belief or faith in other yet-to-be-fulfilled prophetic messages strengthens. To illustrate, how will churchgoers react when they learn an asteroid is on a collision course, and they were not warned by their church pastors or clergy? Will they hate God and those who misled them? Will they still have the faith to refuse the mark of the beast? Will they maintain a self-sacrificing heart and continue to be a light to a chaotic world? If church leaders are wrong about the asteroid impact and the first 4 trumpets, what about Trumpet 5? Are they also preaching erroneous speculations about the Antichrist?
Another important reason for applying or integrating the first 4 trumpets with an asteroid impact is that it helps us determine whether or not the news media is correctly reporting on cosmic destroyers. Having prophetically traversed space and time, we have the foresight to determine whether newscasters align with Bible prophecy rather than the other way around. Incidentally, for crisis intervention, the time and location will probably be suppressed. Nevertheless, we may receive leaked information from government insiders, whistleblowers, or amateur astronomers. Also, since there are no alternate timelines, this apocalyptic nightmare is presented as inevitable, and any attempts to divert this cosmic crash will be futile. On our journey forward in time, it is compelling to note that the opening of Seal 4 overlays or coincides with this asteroidal encounter. When viewed in this context, we discover that our apocalyptic future begins with the dying of 1/4 of the world's population. Revelation 6:8. I looked, and there before me was a pale horse. Its rider was named Death, and Hades was following close behind him. They were given power over 1/4 of the earth to kill by sword, famine, and plague, and by the wild beasts of the earth. The diabolical manifestation of Hades, the god of the dead and king of the underworld or abyss, places Trumpet 5 following close behind. Like watching a sci-fi movie, many survivors are praying for mercy and asking, "Where is God?" As a last thought, consider the possibility that this cosmic singularity is a precursor to the appearance of a false Messiah or the king of Hades impersonating the second coming. Although the explanations proposed in this narrative are the results of over 20 years of research and identify solid scientific arguments, viewer discretion is always encouraged. Knowing that prophetic interpretations cannot be proven until the events occur, combining prophetic and scientific information provides a relatively accurate and realistic view. Hopefully, this presentation has increased your awareness and desire to find the truth. As always, whatever the conclusion, it should be your own. For those who may not know, there are several types of prophecies scattered throughout the Bible. The messianic relates to the first and second coming. The conditional are for Israelites, certain individuals, or a particular group. And then there are global apocalyptic, which pertains to the end times. The predictions presented in Daniel and Revelation are different in that they are unconditional, have a chronological sequence, implement symbolic language, and are apocalyptic. Misunderstanding these types of prophecies could be one reason for the prophetic confusion today. Justifiably, many God-fearing people are perplexed by symbology, saying, "Deciphering these visions is too difficult," and contend that they would rather depend on orthodox clergy or theologians. However, having this viewpoint strengthens the unfair belief that only ordained clergy are qualified. So, do you want to rely on church leaders who preach erroneous after-the-fact prophetic fulfillments? It doesn't seem logical that a loving Creator would allow this without including a solution. Fortunately, the discovery of 10 prophetic rules helps solve this paradox. Until recently, the somewhat obvious rules for interpreting end-time or apocalyptic prophecies were rarely understood or adhered to. Consequently, whenever theologians or anyone studying prophetic scriptures compared their conclusions with others, different perspectives were usually met with a debatable response. Prophetic messages were put anywhere on the prophetic timeline,
and deciding what is symbolic or literal is a guessing game. Now we can, in fact, properly decode and unlock God's secret plan to save billions, and what once seemed too difficult can now be fun and exciting. Besides neutralizing denominational prejudice and traditional interpretations, truth seekers can arrive at similar or the same conclusions as others who apply the same rules. Prophetic rules are comparable to the law of gravity, which is easy to ignore, but remove it and chaos is an uninhabitable result. When defined as an invisible force that always functions the same, it becomes a law or rule that is always true. In like manner, these 10 laws or rules govern how we interpret apocalyptic visions or prophecies. For those willing, the treasure hunt starts when you step into the prophetic time capsule and dig for the buried gold. Like playing a video game, positioning each prophecy correctly on the timeline brings reality to this exciting adventure. By peering into the Creator's looking glass and following the treasure map's 10 rules, you gain confidence knowing you are going in the right direction. Since Bible scripture contains the decoded clues, there is no reason to debate what is symbolic or literal. Empowered by these 10 keys or guidelines, we can unlock the handcuffs of religious dogma and become a free time-travelling guardian of the galaxy. Synonymous with the Protestant Reformation, having your own interpretations makes you part of an ongoing global conquest that is no longer scammed by false teachings. Before presenting these 10 rules, here is a short example or demonstration. To accurately position a vision on the prophetic timeline, there is a rule that requires locating the beginning and ending points. This may seem easy, but notice that the first 6 trumpets start with Revelation 8:2 rather than the first verse. This vision includes 2 chapters and finishes with the last verse in Revelation 9. Since Revelation 8:1 refers to seal 7, it is the end of a subsequent vision and not the starting point. Thus, Revelation 10:1, in this case, is the beginning of another vision, and Trumpet 7 is located in another prophecy. So are you ready to follow the treasure map and step into God's time machine? If so, grab the 10 keys and dial in your coordinates. Rule number 1. The starting and ending points of apocalyptic visions do not always coincide with a chapter's first and last verses. The ending point occurs when a prophecy's rhythm of events is interrupted by an unrelated vision and confirmed by how it integrates with the prophetic timeline. Rule number 2. After locating the starting and ending points, each apocalyptic vision must be coherently and logically assembled on the prophetic timeline. Rule number 3. Visions that overlap or parallel others on the prophetic timeline can be synchronized or linked by matching similar words or phrases. Rule number 4. A prophetic fulfillment can only be confirmed when the criteria of all the elements or events within that vision are satisfied. Rule number 5. Events in each prophecy transpire in the order given and cannot arbitrarily be arranged on the prophetic timeline. Rule number 6. A vision may include an interpretation or provide additional information about a prophecy. Rule number 7. Apocalyptic terminology can be either symbolic or literal. The correct meaning is achieved by comparing prophetic words or phrases with those found elsewhere in the Bible. No symbolic usage indicates a literal interpretation. When both are found, context and relevance become the deterministic factor. Rule number 8. Numbers are never symbolic of another number with a different value. A number may represent something, but the quantity or amount remains the same. Rule number 9. Apocalyptic time is measured as a day for a year during the Jubilee calendar, 1437 BC to 1994. All prophetic visions that occur after 1994 are real-time. Rule number 10. Apocalyptic prophecies in Daniel and Revelation are unconditional and inevitable. They only occur once on the prophetic timeline, and repentance does not prevent fulfillment. So are you ready to start applying the 10 rules? The treasure map has 5 apocalyptic prophetic messages in the book of Daniel and 12 in the book of Revelation. Examples of the beginning and ending points for each apocalyptic prophecy are presented in the following list.